and let me hit the other one.
Hey, welcome along. So we're continuing to talk about things that came from a gospel for all ages, from intergeneration. I went like that. I thought, haven't you seen this book before? I've held it up. That's right.
Yeah,
It was the light.
It was the
making
light.
sure.
So let me share screen. So we've talked. Now I'm going to have to share screen to remember what we've talked about. It's one of those days, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So we talked about some of the sort of different spectrum from age segregation through to intergenerational. Last time we talked about why preaching matters, that it's about testifying to God's story. It's an act of an empowerment for transformation, and it might actually be an encounter with God. I was talking with some people today at the Rachel Turner
Okay,
talks, and they'd just been down to conference in Sydney that's name's gone out of my head, for children's workers, and it was at Collaroy, and Terry Williams was saying, "Oh, the outdoor space is it's terrible because you as a speaker standing there, and behind you is the ocean and stuff, and no one's paying attention." I said, "Well, that just helps the preacher to remember that's what's happening every other day at church." Now I just know they're not listening, whereas other days I pretend they're not listening. Anyway, sometimes preaching might be an encounter with God. And then Dave Senos talks about Jesus is the intergenerational preacher. And so he has some references. So we can all guess what Matthew 19 is.
Can we? Good. Excellent.
Well, given that it's talking about children, what's it going to be?
Let the children come to me.
Let the children come to me.
Did it take him that long to say it? Okay. Yep.
You thought he should have gotten it earlier?
Not earlier, yeah.
Depends on which gospel, probably, as to when he gets around to it.
Got him by the looks, yep.
But yeah, so Matthew, then the children were being brought to him. And Dave Senos points out, that wouldn't have been the only time children were there. It's not like, oh, here's a special occasion that suddenly the children have come out to. This is a reminder that each time Jesus talked, there would have been children. Again, the feeding of the 5,000, you've got the little boy with his food, and whichever is the good gospel points out that it was 5,000 men plus women and children. So children are there as Jesus teaches. Mark 10 is, I think, the rich young ruler who comes. So we guess he's probably a young adult sort of thing. He comes to ask Jesus, what must I do to learn eternal life? And Jesus says, go and sell all you have. So Jesus is talking to children. He's talking to the young adults or young people. Luke 19. It's the only time I'll say I wish my thing had headings. Think he was drawing from Zacchaeus. And so adults, but we see adults all the time. And in Matthew 8, so that's just after the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus talking to elders. Where's the centurion? I'm not sure which particular elder, because it doesn't give me nice headings to make me guess. But that sense of Jesus talks to all the ages, and all ages would have been present with Jesus. So that thing of Jesus is obviously interacting with them in different ways and able to talk to them all together. Dave Senos says, when you look at the Sermon on the Mount, so Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7, rather than a long sermon as we would think of it, it's more a collection of sayings by Jesus. We have this, and then we jump to this, and we jump to that. And, there's not a nice flow and 3 points and here's your application sort of stuff. So there's sort of different styles. He says he went beyond a monological sermon. So monologue, one person talking. So the typical sermon type thing. He did actions visually. So you can imagine him walking along the road and there's the fields and he says, hey, look, the fields are ripe and ready for harvest. Or he's sitting by the ocean and let me tell you this parable about all these fish are caught in. And you don't sort it out on the boat. You wait till you come into land and you sort it as the fishermen are over there sorting out the fish for the catch overnight, whatever. So he uses visuals and he tells these parables that are also visual. He uses healings as jumping points to teach, and he uses words, etc. And sometimes he uses multiples of those. So he's using multiple things. It's not just, I'm going to stand here and speak to you and you're going to listen to me. So we need to remember that the medium through which we proclaim the message is intimately tied to the substance of that proclamation. Let's see if I can find where he says that over here.
So that and the next hyphenated paragraph are quite interesting. So I hope you're going to expand on those ones.
I'm hoping I'm going to.
Sorry, Richard.
That's all right. So
the medium through which we proclaim.
So the medium through we use. So he talked a bit about what style we use and the content. So he says, if we use big words, do we suggest that only the well-educated matter? So I'll chuck out these big words. If I'm not explaining them, then obviously only the educated people in the room matter. Was interesting.
Like even if you do explain them, it makes me feel that I don't know it, therefore, yeah, you're not talking. Yeah, I didn't know it, therefore, what else am I going to miss? But yep, good point.
Yep. So, for me, it's like you have preachers who like to, here's this Greek word means this Greek word means this. For me, it's like you might do one Greek word in a sermon. If you're doing more than that, you're aiming too high.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the reasons I keep saying, every minister should teach RI. Then you get in the habit of some kids going to go, what does that word mean? And you get in the habit of, okay, I can use these big words, but I need to explain them and into everyday language sort of thing.
Yes.
So yes, so that content, the medium we use is tied to what we're proclaiming. If I'm aiming high, speaking as a, what I might say to a theological lecture, then, and of course, part of that is thinking through who is in your congregation. And so if you've got, Tarragindi has a number of teachers, has some uni or has had uni and ex-uni retired ministers, you might aim higher than I would if I was preaching out at Mary War Country Church. You're going to speak differently. And so the words you'll use and things like that. I think that's what that's getting at. So the medium we use, which we proclaim, the message is intimately tied with the substance of that proclamation. So how do we draw people in? Paul Scott Wilson says the sermon form we choose influences the theology we preach, and so affects everything we say. So that's tying in, again, that point. We're using big words, that's tying in a theology of big words and importance and stuff like that.
Is that what that means? Okay.
I think so, yes. From my little notes over here, I think that's what that was getting at. So both substance and style of the way we preach are interconnected. So what are we preaching and how we preach matters. They can't just go, hey, I'll just trundle along with that. So yeah, it's getting us to think Jesus spoke to multiple generations and did it in numerous different ways. And so how do we start to think through that and think, in what ways can I preach? So I haven't started on the sermon for Sunday, but I'm aware in the back of my head that there's no Sunday school, start of school holidays. There might not be many kids in the room, but I need to preach in a way that the kids can sit there and hopefully engage with, as well as the adults. Similar thing as when we've done brigade services and stuff like that. How do I do the message in a way that everyone can interact with? Not that the adults lose, but not that the kids are omitted, sort of thing.
That's right. This is part of what I was worried about as we went intergenerational. I'm hearing it from you, which is really good. That you're conscious. I'm conscious of one of those first things you said as an example of Tarragini. We said this is the sort of the demographics of Tarragini. Therefore, this is how I might preach. When we start to say we're going to, as a church, as a congregation, or as a church, as Uniting Church, but therefore as a congregation at Southside, we're going to do intergenerational. We have to almost wipe that out and say that obviously is not what intergenerational is, because if that is that particular community or location, wherever you might be, we now have to be intergenerational, which says I have to cover everybody generationally, let alone that generation with the various different education and backgrounds and all those sorts of things. And so I'm wondering, and you're probably going to get to it here, is do the people who, using the word here we've been using for the last few weeks, do those who are doing the preaching, whether they're lay or whether they're ordained or otherwise, need to have a significant refresher in how to make sure they are truly doing intergenerational preaching, and not just one word might be dumbing it down for the kids, or simply continuing and saying, no, you will sit in, well, those list of things, you will sit in here, we will be intergenerational, we won't be age segregation, and not making a difference. So I guess one of the big concerns when we get through all these things, that we, as a church, that's everybody, we have got ourselves in a position where we are able to bring the preaching part of Sunday into intergenerational, and still maintain what older people, I guess, would say it's got to be meaningful worship, and that includes that preaching style. So anyway, I'll let you continue. That's what I've been starting to find, those bits that I want to make sure, or well, what influence can I have, but would like to be assured that there is things happening that not just say we're intergenerational, therefore you will sit in church, but we're intergenerational and you will notice the difference. Hopefully the older folk won't notice a difference. They will still get what they want out of it. And the young kids will notice the difference, that they are now included without causing a, well, that's different. I don't think I like this style. It's got to be, love the style no matter what age you're at. I'm sure it's a difficult task.
No. And great thinking. And this is why this is a dialogue, because it's that thinking of, yes, how do we encourage our preachers as we head down, okay, we go intergenerational, and Rod, you're aware of some of the conversations going on around services and all that. And if we go, okay, one of those we want to be deliberately intergenerational on Sunday morning as opposed to Saturday evening, how do we do that? How do we make sure that those who are leading those services are aware of that and are doing some of that training? And again, thinking through that continuum, it might be saying, okay, we want the services to become more intergenerational. So we need to pick up something that's a bit age segregated somewhere else, where we go deep for those that need to go into that deep place. So how do we go, hey, you might not be getting the same sermon as you used to, but we now have this Bible study over here that's going to unpack the reading for the week. Come here and you'll do that. I have this radical, I'm a radical, but I think of, we have worship services. And worship services in the Protestant church tend to become teaching services. And what if you got rid of most of that teaching and did it in Bible studies and just worshipped? But that's just radical and terrible. Why would you do so? Yeah, what if the only teaching was we read the Bible? We had a Bible reading and we did some singing and some prayers. And maybe a very short devotion if you have to, but you went, the teaching stuff, that's happening over there. This is about worshiping, getting together and celebrating this God that we follow. I don't know, I'm probably just too radical.
So long as you don't go, well, not so, I shouldn't have said so long as you don't go. Just be cautious that it doesn't become a very Pentecostal church where that's what we get to. With no negative reflection on any Pentecostals that happen to come in and listen to us discussing today.
That's
but
right.
I was going to comment, everyone will be lost because both you and I have been doing this all night as we talk. So, so we won't be recognised out in the street.
No, not see me. Yeah. So, yeah, so good thinking. Yeah, we continue on this journey and we want to be training up our speakers and stuff to be doing this. Let me just
and one thing we've got to be cautious there too is that everyone needs to be brought in and be able to do it. Otherwise, I might get off. Richard's coming today, therefore it's intergenerational, therefore it'll be low for me and I won't bother listening. Yep. Or I won't go because I want to hear this other person because they preach that way. So hopefully we can all get good at it, no matter whether we're lay or otherwise, and be very inclusive in this particular way of doing things, intergenerational.
Yeah. And one of the things in the back of my mind that I might do this Sunday is one way you can sort of blend the both is what's called a narrative sermon, where you tell a story. So, for instance, I did one once where a story of a little boy and his dad who went to go and see John the Baptist, and it just happened to be when Jesus was there, and tell the story of seeing Jesus being baptized and stuff like that.
Yep.
And so the kids can engage with the story level, but within that story, you can unpack some theology without people noticing that you're unpacking theology type stuff. So you can actually meld the two together in a way that engages both levels. So, it's how do we find, I want to say those tricks, but they're not tricks, but how do we find those ways that allows us to be engaging both at once?
Those techniques.
Pixar movies does that.
Yeah. If you look at Pixar and all those sorts of movies, you've got the dual levels. And if you look at the Muppets, I watched the Muppets as a late teenager and went, Kermit never said that. What? There was multiple levels of humor that children got different things than adults. Anyway, we better stop our time now. Good.
Yeah, sorry to take over. Yep.
No, that's good. That's what this is about. We move where people's thinking is going. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you again next week.